So I'm personally very, very excited. I've worked with Suresh for more than 10 years on different capacity. So the first one is called as beliefs, right? So the second category of ideas, I would say, is the whole idea of luck, risk, and evidence. The third idea is map, mental model. They all can fool you. If the world is so unpredictable, the world cannot be expected to like work in a way where we can model, then how does one be, right? But then this is also true, right? For every wisdom that works, an equal and opposite wisdom also works. Thanks Abhishek, thanks Suresh to having me here.
Thank you, Rajan. Really, thanks. You're doing this amazing.
Like how Abhishek said, right? So this all started with few tweet threads that I did last year. It was around a few ideas on experiences that I had, and I was able to translate these ideas into the experiences. And then I said, oh, this makes a lot of sense, and a lot of things that I knew before now looks completely different. But then when I looked at some of these ideas, which were very, very profound, and they help me explain a lot of things, or help me even change my behavior for future forward, what I realized is that many of these ideas are so big that the world will never look the same after you experience some of these ideas. It's like you're getting a new kind of a lens, right? Like a new spec. You look through the new lens, and the world looks completely different. And these ideas are collected through various books. One or two of them that Abhishek may have already shared with you. One is Psychology of Money, which Morgan Housel released the book late last year in September. Then some of the ideas from Nicholas Nassim Taleb. He had written about some of these ideas. And why these ideas last year were because, as Abhishek said, right, this entire last year has been such a big surprise. If I want to use the word shock, or for my nephew, he said 2020 was great because he said I didn't have to go to school. I could watch YouTube all the way. But when 2020 started, like for many of you, for me it was very difficult. There was fear of death. I'm diabetic, and I wasn't sure that we will come out forward from this. And we are in 2021 Jan 8th today. We're all here sitting and talking. And also, when you have this fear of death, then it makes you question that you have this limited life. You want to ask questions. What are we trying to do? Like in that, have we lived our life? And that leads you to further set of questions. So both Morgan Housel and Nicholas Nassim Taleb, many of the ideas, I was able to translate my experience, use ideas from here, and then said, okay, this makes sense. We are all trying to make sense of things. So if I use some of these ideas, it makes sense. And maybe I can explain a few things better. But the challenge with some of these ideas is that they are not written really well, or they're not exposed in a way that like most people can understand, especially if you take Taleb, right? So one of the things that Taleb said in an interview a few years ago is that I write books in such a way that people don't understand. The ideas that spread are the ones that are simple to understand, and that's where the irony of even the session is. The work that I'm trying to do is that I'm trying to simplify these ideas which are impactful. Those ideas that are simple are the ones that propagate. But then the key central idea that Taleb talks about it is when we try to simplify, we approximate, and in this approximation we lose out the reality. So I said we have to go and ask these questions, and then go all the way to finding out like what are the most important questions to ask. But then if I have to understand them better, remember them better, I read Taleb 10 years ago, I forgot, right? And at that time it helped me. Now again, when I read them, it helped me. You ask those questions, then you have to translate it back to a level where it can be understood and it can be spread. So I like to then call this as that every idea is at three level. One is the bhajan level, the Gita level, or the Veda level. I know Suresh may have talked to you about saying, let's discuss mental models and how do we use mental models to navigate life. But then if I frame this in the same way, there are metaphors, there are mental models, and first principle. In most of the entrepreneurial world, there is this obsession with first principles thinking, which is what people like Nicholas Nassim Taleb or Naval do. But those kind of ideas, I can't remember them, or I can't even have a conversation about them with my nephew. One thing that last year taught me is that if I were to leave something with my kids, then the thing that I leave is ideas rather than wealth, right? So I was interested about taking these ideas and translating it in a way that people can understand. So there are metaphors. Some people don't like the metaphors because they abstract out the reality. But then when you go to the deep question level, and then you have to again translate it back to a bhajan level. My definition of a metaphor is this rickety sofa that you put in your head, on top of which you can put more complex idea. And that is why I know if I share this with Taleb, he will be like, look, you have done the exact opposite thing that I wanted to happen with my ideas. But I try to simplify them so that I can have this conversation with my nephew and other people, so that they can take it forward. So many ideas are there. I will only take 3 broad categories. I'll share with you, and then we should get into some discussions, challenge some of them, build on some of them. And with that, I will dive in. So the first one is called as beliefs, right? Most of us, we are playing games, and there are different kind of games, but we don't understand what's the other person's game is, and we try to judge them. Or we can use the word belief, or we can do the word game, and it can go in an interchangeable kind of a way. If there is one thing in this entire session you have to take away, then I would say that is this: that world in a general way is gaze oriented, not goal oriented. And if this one thing is understood, half of the finance industry will be obliterated, half of MBA academy will get destroyed, because most of what is taught as MBA or in management schools, or general Western thinking, is that we must have goals. We may have heard phrases like, are you a wandering generality, are you a meaningful specific? You must be having goals, you should set targets, and you should move towards a certain direction. If you don't know where you are going, then any road will take you there. All these kind of things exist. But like how it is there in this image, right? If you look at this this cylinder, if you look at it from one perspective, it will look at like as a circle. But if you look at it from another perspective, it will look like a square. So how you view the world is how the world is, and that's what drives behavior, drives belief. There is this idea called crazy is not what crazy does. If some of you have read the book with of Morgan Housel, Psychology of Money, he says there are people who gamble, and those of us who are educated, we look at some of those people who come from real poor situation, and then they buy lottery ticket, and we say, what, this doesn't make any sense, and we pass judgment on them saying that this is irrational and they shouldn't be doing that. But then one thing that we forget is that we've never had experiences like them. Right? We have never had to go through a situation where you have to fight for your food, or basic necessity and needs. And when they buy a lottery ticket, that is that one shot for them to get out of that misery. Since we have never had to go through that kind of experience, our beliefs, our life cycle, our systems are very, very different versus how somebody is going to behave or believe in that particular scenario. I want to share a story here where this particular idea, I heard it from Morgan Housel, and then I've also seen this with books from Devdutt Pattanaik, where he talks about the gaze being different. And this is something that I used when I was working at Intuit as a product person, right? So I was the product manager at Intuit, and QuickBooks was the product that I was working with. And the global headline H1 or the value proposition for QuickBooks is save time. Right? You use QuickBooks, you save time on bookkeeping that you do, things like that. I had to have a long discussion with my colleagues on saying why save time does not work in India. And one of this story from Devdutt Pattanaik is what eventually helped them understand the difference. And the story goes like this. Right? So this story is the story of Alexander the Great and the naked gymnosophist. Right? Alexander, he comes to India, and he's conquering the entire world. He comes to the central India, and then he comes to a place near Shravana somewhere in Karnataka, and there he's camping, and he realizes that some of his soldiers are not doing well. He asks his subordinate, and subordinate comes back and tells them that all our soldiers are going crazy, right? And he says, find out. Then the subordinate come back and says they're going crazy because they are meeting this person called the gymnosophist, and he's telling them something, and that's making them go crazy. So he said, okay, this is very, very grave. So I need to go and meet this gymnosophist. So he goes to the place where he's supposed to be there. There is a rock. There is a person that is sitting there with, folding his legs and in a Gaumukhasana, and then he's looking into the sky. So Alexander the Great, he walks to the gymnosophist and says, "What are you doing?" So he shifts his gaze to him and he says, "Okay, what are you doing?" Right? So Alexander the Great says, "I'm conquering the world. Right? That's what I'm set out to be doing." So the gymnosophist laughs at him. Right? So then he again repeats the question, saying, "What are you doing?" He says, "I'm doing nothing." Right? And then Alexander the Great again laughs at him in the same way as gymnosophist laughed at Alexander the Great. So both of them are laughing at each other because both of them had an upbringing which are fundamentally different. Alexander the Great, when he was a young kid, his mother taught him, his parents taught him that when he grows up, like, he has to achieve something in his life, and after he achieves that, that is what is used to measure on what will happen to him after he dies and goes to this special place called Elysium. In Greek mythology, that is the place, that's the equivalence of heaven. And he has to cross this river called Styx. He will be stopped at the gate of Elysium, and they will ask him, they will look at him saying, "What did you achieve in life?" And based on the amount of achievement, that will be put in the numerator. And he had one life. So based on that, he will be given a status inside Elysium. And therefore, he is been on a quest to achieve as much as possible in the world. Right? So he goes after that. And that's why he's gone on a world conquering quest. Now, for the gymnosophist, he's also been taught a very similar story. He also dies, crosses a river called Vaitarani, goes to Vaikuntha, which is the heaven for us in Indian mythology. But then he has been said that, look, everything that he does, it will be looked at, but then that will have consequences. And for after that, he will again cross the river back, come to earth, and take another rebirth. Right? Will kind of go forward again through that. So for him, when his position is looked at Vaikuntha, the numerator is going to be whatever achievement he's going to make, but the denominator is going to be the number of births that he's going to have. And that is going to continue to be infinity as long as he does some action, and consequences are going to be there. So for Alexander the Great, his position is based on one life, how much achievement, and that has to be maximized. And numerator by denominator is equal to the achievement. For the gymnosophist, what the numerator can be as many things or as big a number as possible, but as long as the denominator is zero, the total value is going to be the denominator is infinity to the total value is going to be zero. So for him, he had one life, he had to achieve many things. But for the gymnosophist, it was like, I have so many life. If I didn't achieve it here, then I will come and achieve it in the next life. Right? So for him, doing nothing would still be equal to zero, and doing everything will still be equal to zero, is the belief in which this guy was brought up. And the other person, he was told that there is only one life, and therefore he has to maximize on this. And this is what kind of drives a lot of the belief in West versus East. And we see a lot of this goal chasing and say that this is the goal, this is the strategy, and I'm running towards that. And that behavior of people saying, I care for my time, I need to maximize my time, I need to save time, is what kind of drives it. And here in India, if I didn't do it in this janma, then I will do it in next janma, right? So that's the fundamental difference in how a like person in the US or like or Western mythology views it versus somebody who in an Indian mythology kind of views it. And then if you really think about save time, see, when you save something, you should be able to reuse it. In fact, it is just a wrong metaphor. When you save time, you save nothing, right? So this experience kind of came back to me again and again in saying that whatever belief that people have, that is what shapes how they are going to behave. And if you want to understand how somebody is behaving, it is important to ask the question of what is the belief that they have, and what may look like crazy to you. You don't know what is the belief and what's the experience that has shaped that belief. So like, you should be a little bit thoughtful when questioning the behavior. So this leads me to the same point, but said in a different way. Don't compare, because everyone is playing a different game. And here again, I'm going to take 2 to 3 minutes to talk about a story. And this is through my experience of working with a lot of Indian founders. I have seen 3 types of Indian founders. I call this the story of surfer, voyager, and the fisherman. And this story and this observation is also helping me make myself career choices on what I want to do, how I want to do. And so the story that I have seen of last 10 years of product founders, call them as surfer, voyager, and fisherman. So surfer is someone who is always looking to chase the next big tide. He's looking to say, hey, what are the things that are coming as the tailwinds? Is it AI? Is it ML? Is it blockchain? Let me jump onto that particular tide and kind of ride them. And in things like that, it doesn't matter how capital efficiently or how profitably you are going to do. In fact, if you want to be a successful surfer, you should be unfaithful to the old wave or the tide that you're riding. Which means that if you're working on, let's say, some workflow application, but if you are the surfer nature, then you should completely drop it, because that may be that may not be the one that is going to rise up. You have to jump to the next one. You should always catch the next wave or the tide. And most of us, when we become entrepreneur or interested in becoming entrepreneur, we see that surfers are always celebrated. Like, you will see journalists always crowding around surfers saying, "Oh, you're so cool, you're so great," and they'll always be in front pages of Time magazine. And we experience or imagine ourselves there and say that, okay, that is the reason I want to be an entrepreneur. In that particular game, it is instant fame, instant gratification, but that means becoming unfaithful to the idea that you are already working with. But it also means that you need to have the skill of anticipating the next wave and jump to that. So storytelling and the ability to sort of anticipate the next one to jump and balance. And that's something that you have to develop as a skill. And that's the journey of a surfer. And a lot of VC funded founders in the last 10, 15 years were all about surfing. And these surfers, they also go, when they have to surf, they need a surfboard, right? So they go to their brotherhoods, right? If they have come from specific colleges, specific fraternity, those people may not have served or served in the past, retired, and they may be even blind to what is happening next. But they could say, hey, I'm hearing the sound of the next surf coming. Instead of 1 million, take 10 million, right? And I don't care if, like, out of 100, 99 die. If that one person wins, then all my bets are paid off. So they fund you. They like, you go to the brotherhood and they fund you, and then that you become you learn the game of surfing. So this is one type of game. I could just give so many examples, but Vijay Shekhar Sharma or Kunal Bahl, so many other B2C founders are all surfers. Or you take pretty much any company in the valley, they're all surfers. So the second type of founder is what I call as a voyager. He's someone who's worked in other ships, like other voyages. If you think about startup, really, startup is actually a voyage to a treasure island, right? Where you're saying, hey, here is the new thing that is going to come up, and that is going to create a lot of wealth for us. So come with me on that voyage, and it'll be fun. You bring along also some of the investors saying, hey, you fund my voyage, I'll get there and I'll spoil the riches with you. But the typical way this works is that this comes through apprenticeship. It's like, I've worked somewhere else where a voyage was going on. I take that experience and I go into a voyage which is either 30 degrees northeast of wherever the earlier treasure island was, or it is something else. Is it the same place or not? So in that particular case, you say that, look, I have this business model or business map in my head. That was my experience. And now I did not like that, the captain of the previous voyage did not go 30 degree northeast. There would have been a bigger treasure island. Now you, Mr. Blindman, fund me, and then I will spoil the riches with you. Many folks who have work experiences, they come and take this particular approach. In India, I would say Dhruva is a great example of that. Jaspreet worked at Veritas. He came out and he built a similar product and built a $100 million ARR business. Then the last one is what I would call as a fisherman. Right? These are people who will say that, look, I care about my life. I care about the approaches that I'm taking. I care about my time. I will go to a corner in the sea. I will put my fishing rod and I'll wait there. I'll catch a little bit of fish, take that, feed myself, sell the extra in the market, and I'm chilled out with my life like this. And these fishermen, sometimes they even say, hey, like, I'm the one who's putting food on the table. I don't understand why the journalists are chasing the surfer and the voyager, where like, it's instant gratification. They're just dream chasers, right? But what happens in a journey of a fisherman is that like, one day becomes 2 weeks, 2 months, many months becomes years, and suddenly this small shipping boat becomes this huge fishing magnet. So initially the journalist, after the stories of the surfers, because it is wow, it is so cool, and afterwards, they chase the voyagers, because if some treasure island is found, they are like, oh, they braved so many weather vagaries and they were able to find this new treasure island, so they write that story. And then finally, after 10 years, 15 years, is when they write the story of the fisherman, of saying, look, a small fishing boat became this huge fishing magnet, and then it becomes like a great story. So in the fisherman game, it is delayed gratification and it is not instant fame, right? And there you have to think about sustenance. And in the surfer game, it is instant gratification of fame and fortune, money. But then the downside is that you could lose a limb or you could lose a leg. And I think, any of the game is okay, right? As long as you know what is the game that you're playing and what is the horizon, what do you care? Do you care for instant gratification, or do you care for something like delayed gratification? And I extend this analogy to even describe investors, right? So, and this is where I was able to make some decisions on career, on what type of thing that I want to do. I was an entrepreneur. I said, which one do I want to go forward, and also had the opportunity to sort of work like as an investor. But if you were to take an analogy for investor is like a pilot, right? A pilot is a very, very glamorous job. You're wearing sunglasses, you are walking so coolly, you get paid well. But then if you really think about a pilot's job, it is very, very boring, and it's very, very like repetitive. And it is so repetitive that most people don't trust that you would do a good job, so therefore they put a co-pilot. Right? So you are following a checklist. The checklist is being checked by your co-pilot, saying that, have you done this really well? And over a period of time, it's not too risky. I mean, there could be some risk about, like, planes going down, but all of your career of 30 years of flying boils down to one point, where if the plane was under a rough weather or it had a hit, then are you able to land the plane in Hudson River or not? So most of the investors, like venture investors or any other type of investors, they are like these pilots. They can spend 20, 30 years life of giving all kinds of talk or not doing any kind of talk and sitting and doing nothing. But if they didn't pick up that one momentous time and make an investment around .com or during financial collapse, or even now in the case of SaaS during the Corona time, then, like, 10 years before, 10 years after, whatever they did will not matter. Right? So the thing is that we only look at what is the title somebody carries, what is his money in the bank, and that is how we judge, right? We don't know what is the rules of the game that the other person is following, right? If the other person may be playing soccer, which is English soccer, which you play with leg, but you may be playing American football where you catch the ball, and since you don't understand what is the other person's game, you may end up calling foul. And this was so interesting and important for me, that I don't take a point of view on bootstrap versus funding. And so that was one of my biggest takeaways of saying there is reason for each of the person to follow a particular path, right? Whether a VC funded path or a bootstrap path, or like working in a startup, not working in a startup, working in a large company. We don't know what the game they are playing, so should be thoughtful about like calling it good or bad. So the second broad idea, I think I spent a lot of time in the first one. I'm going to quickly cover the second and the third one, and then I am really looking forward to us having discussion around these ideas, right? So the second category of ideas, I would say, is the whole idea of luck, risk, and evidence. All of us have very different ideas about risk, very different risk, right? Very different definitions of risk. this is a statement that I said that my nephew absolutely enjoys. I said, like, hard work is not equal to success, and lazy is not equal to poverty. It's a very, very tricky statement to make. He now uses this statement with his mother. He says, Mother, right, look, the world is complex. No matter what kind of input that I put, like, if in some big outcome has to happen, then a lot of that is attributed to luck. So like, let's chill out a little bit. And for many, including me, it was very difficult to kind of comprehend. So luck, if I were to explain in a very simple way, luck is you had good results but you made bad decisions. And luck and risk are like two opposite sides of the same coin, where you don't have control of when and how it happens. Risk, so I think the slides got mixed. Luck is you had so it's correct. So risk is when you made good decisions but you still had bad results, right? So that's the difference between the two. And why does this happen? This happens because we have this confidence of saying that, look, based on all the past experiences I have had, I will use that past experiences to judge the future. So it is like, we navigate our life in a way by looking directly into the rear view mirror of our experiences, and that gives us false confidence. And that makes us believe that whatever that is going to come in the future, we don't know whether it is going to be a pandemic or we will find a treasure island, right? And if you said, I never imagined that we would see a pandemic, I myself never imagined that we'll ever see a pandemic. Now 1 year later, we are not going to be surprised by another pandemic, because now a pandemic is in our rear view experience, right? So but tomorrow what is going to happen, we again don't know. So this idea of, if there is a absence of an evidence, right, you could not find it, doesn't mean it does not exist. And especially this is to be kept in mind for things which can have adverse impact on you, right? This is a slide where me and my nephew have spent an enormous amount of time. He basically says that you are saying that, look, you should not be scientific and you should go with belief, right? But that's not the point about this particular slide. Science does ask for evidence, but what the slide or what this idea is saying is that evidence is limited. To have full confidence over evidence and say that, look, now that I have evidence, I will be more confident and I'll drive through, that is the thing that has to be kept in check. So risk is essentially things that you don't know, what you can't see. Risk is not volatility. Most people think if it goes up and down, if stock market goes up and down, if a valuation of startup goes up and down, then that is risk. That is just the fee that you pay to play the game. Risk is what that can truly kill you, right? Risk is what is called as in the language of Taleb and Morgan Housel, risk is an uncle point, which means that have you done something which is going to completely ruin you, so that only a rich uncle only can come, or rich or a powerful uncle can only come and save you. If you do something, if it leads to a loss of reputation, a loss of life, those are things that you should not even use formulas and maps and logic to take choices on. There is this idea of a Russian roulette. If you have watched the movie Sholay, I'm pretty sure that you remember that scene where Gabbar takes a revolver and rotates it, puts a bullet in this, and tries to shoot. So the Russian roulette game is very similar to that, except that it says that you get $1 million if you shoot yourself and you don't die. Right? If you use math, if you use logic, you will say 5 out of 6, right, is the odds of success, right? So it is worth taking it. But you talk to a young kid, you talk to somebody who's not tainted by education, they'll say, are you crazy? Just that one particular thing of you getting shot, that's not worth taking it. You should not be looking at probability here. You should be looking at common sense, right? So what is it that can kill you? Never take those choices. That's what risk is. And when that happens on the positive side, that is what luck is, right? When things happen to you in a pretty big way. A great example in the book by Morgan Housel is saying that, for every Bill Gates, he had another person who was like Bill Gates, who died early because of a freak incident, right? So we can't add. So the idea about luck and risk is, when something good happens, better to attribute to luck and also sort of stay humble with it. And when something bad happens, also be kind to you. Many founders that I work with, they're like, okay, my startup did not work and it is all because of me. right? And so just because you attribute positive results to yourself, you also start attributing negative results also to yourself. So having humility when something goes well and having kindness towards you when something doesn't go well is like a great lesson I have taken from this particular section. The third idea is the map mental model. They all can fool you, which follows the same kind of zone as the science part. If you have seen this movie Komali, there is this one scene that I like, absolutely love there. Google Map poi sollade. All of us, when we start using maps, we become so engrossed in it that we only focus on just following the path, right? But many a times the map is not completely representing the reality. Another great example of this is using numbers to describe, right? Always say never trust averages, right? There is this famous Warren Buffett quote saying 6 feet, sorry, a four of if you pick averages, let me get the quote right. It says a 6 feet man can drown on an average of 4 feet river, right? Why? Because when you say averages, you are assuming that all across it is going to be the same. But in some case, it could be 12 feet. In another places, it could be 1 feet, right? Some places it could be 8 feet. Some places it could be half a feet. And if you average it out, it will be more than 4 feet, right? So that is the thing that, like, when you just describe it using just a number, you get the confidence of, looks like I understand it, but you don't know the details. And therefore, when people use a lot of probability, a lot of mathematics, that gives them a lot of confidence. But none of these confidence could explain this whole incident that happened last year where oil price could go zero. Right? If all the formulas were correct, oil price could have never gone zero or below that. Right? So math always gives you this illusion of control, but you have to be careful. So when you think about any system, right, we all like to think about the system as ironclad laws and repeatability, more like how physics works, right, how Newton works. It is better to think about these systems more like biological systems instead of physical systems. Think more like Darwin, that these systems are not bound by cold immutable laws. They are messy, they have mutation, there are some accidents, and they adapt. So treat them as more as a thumb rule, because a lot of the mistakes that we make is because we thought, like, look, the stock market cannot go down, but because of this formula told me this is how it will happen. But formula is just a abstraction, and it may be an approximation, and it has not taken care of those edges and the detail that reality brings in. So this brings me to some ideas to think about or question, right? So most of us, when we think about finance and goal, we are talking about, okay, this much amount of wealth that I want, and I'm targeting to get my certain amount of money, and after that I will sit and I will enjoy the retirement. But if you really think about money, the biggest leverage that it can biggest dividend that it can bring is independence, right? Most people, when they are doing these goals, they're not looking to get these savings later on that will continue to build forward. It is to move away from few things, like, not have a back pain, not even travel long hours for office, or work with whoever whenever I want. Those are the things that I want to have independence from, rather than having money, right? I worked myself, I had long commute hours, back pain, and if the money is sitting in the bank, then it's not going to help me with back pain and bad health. So the sooner you are able to get some of this money and have these other ideas addressed, the better it is. If the world is so unpredictable, the world cannot be expected to work in a way where we can model, then how does one be, right? One of the things I have learned from this 10 to 12 years of experiences, many people said after the financial crisis, everything will sort of die down. And in fact, March of last year also, there was this discussion about saying doomsday scenario. Have you watched this movie? And this is how, Train to Busan, this is how it will happen. But one thing about life and humanity is that in the long term, everything works out, right? It may be in the short term there are these ups and downs. Like in the long term, even the financial crisis worked out. It's only in science novels, science fiction, you find dystopia. But in real life, humans eventually figured out, and we all come stronger out of this. So therefore it is useful to have what is called as a barbell, like completely contradictory point of view. Have a long term optimism, saying in the long term everything will be all right, but in the short term, tomorrow, day after, be very, very pessimistic. Because in the long term, if you've not made like gross mistakes, like play Russian roulette, in the long term, imagine that everything will work out. But in the short term, you are seeing things in so much detail, where light is being shown on what's happening around you. In that, try to survive, right? Be pessimistic about it. And that's a very tricky kind of a mindset to have. But most entrepreneurs are folks who are really good at having this point of view. They have strong opinions, but that are loosely held. I had another framing of this from a paper I came across by a scientist called Richard D. Hamming. He was awarded the Nobel Prize. He framed it slightly differently. He called it as having emotional certainty but intellectual uncertainty. He said, as a scientist or like any entrepreneur, or it's true for anybody in a normal life as well, is this to have belief that some models work. So he said, as a scientist, I need to wake up that what Einstein came up with, what Newton came up with, all those theories work. But one observation that I find that may challenge that, I should be intellectually honest to even question that. But every day, if I question myself that, none of the model before me has actually been true, then I won't have the motivation to even wake up and work on something. So that is why you need to have emotional certainty, so that you can bring your team along with you to say, hey, this sounds right. I have conviction around it. Let's move forward. But internally, you need to have this intellectual honesty to say, you know what, maybe that was not right. I need to question that. And that is a skill that you'll have to constantly think about, put yourself into those kind of situation, and then build a muscle for that. So entrepreneurs are like really good at doing this. Scientists are also people that are really good at doing this. If anything, what pandemic has told me is to also have strong opinions loosely held. So I thought, everything on SaaS will shut down in March. I was talking about invisible tsunami. But now I think, the best thing that has happened to all the SaaS company is something like a pandemic, because they're all trading crazy multiple. Again, this could be a bubble. We don't know. And if something that makes me change my view, I'll again change it. So finally, I want to sort of tell this one point, right? We all love wisdom, especially when it is one sentences, whether it is a Tirukural or a Avayar's sage sayings. All the wisdom that works over a period of time, there is a reason for that. But then this is also true, right? For every wisdom that works, an equal and opposite wisdom also works. And that kind of goes back to the first point about the gaze that you use is what is still governing the world. Now, as science, we may have evidence that could question it, but don't use the evidence to get a false confidence. And maps can hide the reality. Therefore, if you have a strong opinion weakly held, or a barbell kind of a view, where a long-term optimistic with a short-term view, and not really chase a goal, but say, hey, what are the regrets that I want to minimize? That may be some good set of ideas to make sense of what is happening around us, and also be at peace with how to make decisions moving forward. Thanks, Abhishek. Thanks, Suresh, to having me here.
Hey, Rajan, thanks for doing this, man. Okay, once again, really appreciate it.